I want to continue a little bit about the compassion of the Israelis and why I know the Israelis the way I do. After we were finished in the emergency room, and I was talking to you about my mother being in the emergency room, they gave her first aid. They took her up to the 4th floor of the hospital, where 2 other Lebanese ladies were brought in that morning. 1 Muslim, 1 Druze from Lebanon. They put my mother in the room, and we were not there but 5 minutes, and I heard all this commotion outside our window. So I ran to the balcony to see what was going on. And I looked down, and 2 Israeli helicopters had just landed, bringing in wounded people from Lebanon. And I remember looking down stretcher after stretcher, carrying, and, and everybody ran to the balcony to see what was happening. And I remember being surrounded by mothers of Israeli wounded soldiers in the war, fathers, sisters, wives. It was an unbelievable scene. And I remember looking down, not making eye contact with anybody next to me, because even though I knew I'm a Christian, they didn't know that. I know I'm their friend. They're not going to do anything to me. I just felt so out of place looking at that scene. I didn't make any eye contact with anyone. I felt sick to my stomach. I felt brokenhearted that these people are wounded because of the war with my country. And all of a sudden I feel this tapping on my shoulder, and this lady next to me looks at me and she puts her arm around me and she said, "You are new here, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, they just brought in my mother. She's in this room." And without skipping a beat, she puts her arm around me and she hugs me and she said, "Oh, don't worry. We'll take good care of her. And if you need anything, my name is Leah." And I remember breaking down crying. I remember breaking down because I felt such human quality that I knew it did not exist in my culture. I was standing on the 4th floor of that balcony knowing if I was a Jew standing in any hospital in any Arabic country, I would be thrown down to my death as shouts of joy of Allahu Akbar would echo through the street and down the surrounding neighborhoods. But they didn't. I spent 22 days in that hospital. Those days changed my life, changed the way I think about Israel. There were people being treated, Palestinians, Muslims, Druze, Israeli treated everybody in such a human way, in such a compassionate way. It was unbelievable. I had to go back to Lebanon to take care of my parents. But I vowed that one day I will return to Israel, because these were the type of people I wanted to live amongst. These are the type of characters I wanted to have. As I stood on that balcony that day, I knew these people were able to forgive and love the Palestinians, their enemy, in a way I wasn't able to, and I was the Christian who was taught to love like Jesus taught. Those days changed my life. I ended up going back to Lebanon that day. But 2 years later, I made my way back to Jerusalem, and I became news anchor for World News in the Middle East, covering world events from 1984 till 1989. My story is detailed in a New York Times bestseller titled "Because They Hate."